Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and I'm here today to review Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life, and by phone, I'm joined by a great friend and a great contributor to T.H.O. It's Patrick Belin. Patrick, how are you?
Hello, everybody. Nice to be back. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and unfortunately, we're going to have to do this over the phone lines.
Well, before we dive in, Patrick, I've got a question for you that's been it's been burning for a while. When I was after I saw the Rise of Skywalker with our friend and colleague Jeff Wallace, he said he'd talked to you about the film, and he said that you had said something that intrigued me. He said that you said it'll destroy your brain or something to that effect. But he said he wasn't. Or he said he
talking about the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, but he said he wasn't sure if he meant that as a good or bad thing.
I totally meant that as a bad thing.
I wondered.
Rise of Skywalker. Yes. I made that comment because of the way Abrams directed it. It's so fast paced that it doesn't allow you to stop and reflect on what's going on, because it's almost as if it's afraid of you to think about what's going on because you'll realize how stupid it is.
I could not agree more. I mean, I saw it just a couple of days actually before I saw a Hidden Life. I had J.J. Abrams and Terrence Malick basically in one weekend. So like after that, I thought, oh man, if Malick lets me down, I'm gonna be I'm already depressed. I'm gonna be seriously depressed. If he lets me down. So I think that's the perfect time to segue into what Patrick did you think of A Hidden Life?
A Hidden Life?
Yeah.
Of course, I used the 4-star metric, and I gave it a resounding 4 out of 4.
Yes, excellent.
It's well, I mean, I'm not just saying that as a Malick fan. I'll explain why I would give it 4 out of 4. But personally, it was a very tough movie for me. It was. I mean, it is a depressing film in itself, but it was just hard for me to take. Personally, anyways, it was generally it's just done in such a powerful way that I walked out of the theater feeling really depressed, and just to get back up and be able to drive home afterwards. That's how much of the movie that's how much it impacted me as a movie. That aside, I mean, it's technically very well done. I don't have a lot of complaints about it. I don't see any weakness about it. If somebody else were to go into this movie expecting a typical World War II film with a lot of action and things like that, they'll be sorely disappointed, because that's definitely not what producers were aiming for in this. And what it does extremely well. Anyways, I'll stop there. And what did you think of it?
I loved it. I mean, it's obviously, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted us to do this is, because as you and I are certainly the biggest Terrence Malick fans on the podcast. Perhaps even the only Terrence Malick fans on the podcast, and so I mean, my expectations are, extremely high. Anytime I see his name on a film, I'm certainly not someone who sees, his recent work as like, as lost years. Essentially, I think he's continued to make, great films, from when he started out with Badlands to right up until now, and I do think A Hidden Life is a great film. Not a return to form, in my opinion. Just an evolution of a master's work, and I really like what you said about just feeling so depressed after it, because I saw it at Regal Fox Tower, downtown Portland, and I got out of the movie I don't know, a couple hours before I had to go work at Cinema 21, and so I was I had from one theater to another, I was like walking in the rain, just thinking about Franz Jägerstätter being executed, and just the loss and futility and death and injustice. And it's like I think a lot of people I know have had the complaint, even people who like it, that the film is too long. I mean, it's close to 3 hours, but I think that's actually part of its power, because I feel like one reason why it's so emotional is you live with these characters for what feels like a lifetime, and that affects your mind and even your body, because you're sitting that long to kind of have that intimacy with them. I think that's just extraordinary. It's I haven't released my top 10 movies of the year list, but when I do, it was our listeners and readers are going to find out it's pretty well deep into my top 5. So I was devastated, of course, but also overjoyed that it was so impactful.
Great. What strikes me about this movie too is it's how under the radar it's gone, and even now nobody talks about it.
Yes.
It's as if it's just being swept aside.
Yes.
This movie does a lot of things right, and it does a lot of things very well. And I'm wondering if it's because it's so. I don't know if it's just me or if the movie is. Well, I mean, the topic itself is kind of depressing.
Yes.
I wonder if that's one of the reasons why people are just kind of steering clear of it.
I think that's a big reason, because it's always the one thing to know what a movie's about, then it's another thing to actually experience it. I know that I personally was not prepared to watch a film this emotional, where the entire thing is leading up to the main character's execution. And that's a very hard thing to do, to watch all these scenes, sometimes very beautiful scenes of family and love, knowing that it's all leading toward death. I mean, that's a very tough thing.
Right. I mean, anyone who was I think it's fair to say that the majority of people who are going to go into this movie kind of know what it's all about. It's a very simple story. It's just about a principal defector, and he gets executed. It's a true story. So there really isn't much to tell, but the film itself is a great portrayal of who he was in his life, and his experience of what he had to give up. And I think that was done really beautifully here. It's a shame that not a lot of people will really appreciate this. If it's going to remain under the radar, it'll probably just be forgotten about. I guess a hidden life and a hidden movie.
It's true. Before we move on to the next discussion question, I will say one thing that really bugs me is, I remember, when the New World came out, it got, very little awards love, but it did at least get a cinematography Oscar nomination for A Man in Little Lubezki. So I kind of thought, perhaps naively, well, this isn't going to get nominated for Best Picture, but at least, Jörg Widmer's just absolutely gorgeous cinematography is going to get nominated, and that obviously did not happen.
That surprises me, because I thought there was a lot of interesting things going on here with the cinematography.
Yes.
Now, I like how Malick took a little bit of time off with his what I would like to call the immersion trilogy.
I love that.
The song and the other films, but a lot of that comes into this. What I really like about Hidden Life is how, compared to most movies, and even compared to Malick's previous films, there wasn't any star power in this at all.
No.
It was fairly unknown people. I mean, I think the most famous actor here is the main guy, and even him is relatively unknown. So
yeah, he just had a minor role in *Inglourious Bastards*.
Yeah, you're not going into this as if you're watching Tree of Life and you're thinking, oh, this is a Brad Pitt movie. I wonder what Brad Pitt's doing these days. There's none of that distraction here. There's no spit shine to it.
Yes,
and that's what I think is really critical here. The one thing that I find brilliant about Hidden Life is how it's probably one of the most dramatic films I've seen in a while, yet at the same time, the screenplay and the script specifically tries to mute the drama, and by muting the drama, it actually amplifies it to a next level that a lot of films haven't achieved this.
Well, that's a really interesting point. That it brings us to something I want to talk about. Is this is the first Terrence Malick film in a while that had a formal script, and he was using inspiration from real letters that Franz and Fanny Jägerstätter exchanged, and he structures the script in such a brilliant way, I think, by not having it just be Franz Jägerstätter's story, but also the wife Fanny's story, and kind of once Jägerstätter goes off to jail, the film still spends substantial time back home on the farm in the village, seeing what's happening to her, and you seeing the cost she has to bear for his choice. I mean, I wonder if we could talk about what the effect of that is, because a lot of filmmakers, they would not have made the movie this way. They would have made it as more like kind of a traditional great man biopic as opposed to kind of the story of a marriage.
Right. Yes, that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. How the drama is very muted here. It doesn't try to put Franz on a pedestal. It portrays him and depicts him as a very simple man with a principle that he was committed to. And in order to keep him off the pedestal, so to speak, they did have to contextualize his life around his family, his wife, his daughters, the townspeople, and everything like that. I really like how, earlier I was kind of thinking about some of the World War II films that I really love, besides this one. When it comes to drama, I think one of the more dramatic World War II films that I've seen is Schindler's List. But this movie is such the opposite of Schindler's List. Where Oskar Schindler was portrayed in a way where he was a hero. Mm-hmm. And it was very heroic. And it was even produced and directed in a very traditional Hollywood way, in terms of the screenplay and the plot and things like that. I'm not going to say that A Hidden Life is completely unstructured, but it was very ordinary in its depiction of Franz compared to the way Oskar Schindler was portrayed.
Yes. Well, I think that's a really great comparison to make, because these Schindler's List and A Hidden Life next to each other, and indeed comparing Spielberg and Malick gives you such a kind of an interesting perspective on how different the approach can be to this kind of story, to this era of history, really. And it's interesting that I think Schindler's List is a great film. I think it's a masterpiece, but I think there's a level of intimacy in A Hidden Life that perhaps Schindler's List doesn't quite attain. Because when I think about Hidden Life, I think about Franz Jägerstätter on the train, going to where he knows he's going to be arrested, and just how the camera holds for a while on his face with his eyes closed, just really kind of not worrying about in that moment advancing the story, but just kind of like trying to, put us in the moment, with him, and like a lot of times with Malick, it's guided more by kind of gut and feeling than reflection, rather than we have to hit this beat and this beat and this beat to create a movie that's accessible for a mass audience.
Right. Going back to the start about how I felt about this movie, it wasn't only depressing for me. I also found it very terrifying in how it portrays its historic period. You're in the middle of the war. You're in the middle of this populist paranoia. I don't know how to describe it. Like basically everybody lost their minds.
Yep.
And this family, Franz and his family, are trying to navigate this. When you compare the beginning of the film to the end, towards the end of the film, where it starts off the first third. It starts off as this very idyllic life in the Austrian Alps. Things are well, and then the drums of war get louder, and people start losing their minds, and then you have this very critical scene where Franz is being berated by his drunken mayor, calling him a traitor.
Yes, I was just thinking about that scene, yeah.
You can just imagine, the way it was portrayed was very powerful to me, and you can just imagine being in this man's shoes and what that would mean to him and eventually his family. And you could see the slow crumble throughout the progressed, and it just it was like it kept building. It kept building to the point where he was executed.
Yes.
And just talking about it is just really disturbing me.
It disturbs me too, and I think I'm so glad you bring up that scene, because there's a line I think there is quite important. I mean, you mentioned that the drunken mayor refers to him as a traitor, and I think it's really interesting how the mayor phrases that. He says something to the effect of like, "Oh, the Nazis are terrible, but you're worse because you're a traitor." And
right.
I mean, you think about that? What a thing to say, and what a morally skewed way of looking at it, and it's, I don't know, like it's so easy to say that was a long time ago, but then again, when you hear that kind of thing, you realize, well, people make that exact same argument all the time today.
Right, and it scares me because it's so contemporary now.
Yes. With
the way the world is going, and how if you don't support Mein Führer or Donald Trump, then you're a traitor also.
Yep.
It's that kind of sense. Going back to that scene with the mayor, that was the beginning of the family's alienation from their own home village, and that was very painful to watch. And it kind of bookends, that scene kind of bookends towards the end where the mayor was drunk on alcohol and whatever, and the receiving end of that ideology, and then he goes to and towards the end of the film, it bookends to the other side of that ideology, where the power structure, the top of the power structure, is the one perpetuating these ideology, and he gets berated on that side too. So he's taking it from both ends, in the scene where he was condemned to death.
Yes.
He's being condemned. He's being berated on the one side from the top of the power structure, and then early in the film, he's being berated by his own mayor by the receiving end of the ideology. So he's just being ping-ponged around in this crazy world, and then he's eventually executed.
Well, yeah, it's so true, because it's kind of funny. Like you think of like if like so many characters, like try to talk Franz out of his beliefs, basically, and you think if they had spent all the energy that they spent, trying to tell him he's wrong, if they had spent that energy on, resisting the real villain, it's like they might have actually, gotten something done.
Mm-hmm. And what I liked about the portrayal and the way the screenplay was set up and the portrayal of Franz is that it doesn't try to give you this so-called Martha moment, where he turns.
Yes.
It's like, oh, Martha, I'm gonna be a principal defector, and because I'm gonna be beautified I'm gonna be sainted by the Catholic Church in 100 years, so I'm gonna do it for that reason. There's none of that. If anything, it keeps it very ambiguous as to his exact thought process in this. It depicts it simply as what we know by the historical record, that he's he defied Hitler and he was executed for it. It doesn't try to embellish that too much. It doesn't try to fill in the blanks too much, and I really appreciated that about this film.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an almost radical idea that that the movie's putting forth, that someone could do something like this just as a matter of principle, and that there doesn't need to be like some sort of explanation, like, oh, he's doing this because he could never please his father or some bullshit like that,
Right, exactly. There's no origin story. I feel like origin stories are so overdone and overrated these days. It's like everything has to have an origin for some reason.
Because you think about all the great movies, like so many great films are not are not origin stories, and in fact really begin like kind of in the middle of the story, Vertigo, doesn't start by showing, James Stewart's character as a little boy first realizing he has acrophobia. Star Wars doesn't begin, thank God, with the events of the Phantom Menace, or at least it didn't at first, but I don't know. I mean, it's like to me, like the concept of it, explaining everything like through an origin, unless it's done with a lot of thought and care and artistry, like in Batman Begins. To me, like that whole concept can be almost anti-cinematic, really.
Okay. What I really appreciated about this movie was, yes, it was about Franz's life and his family and their struggles, but I think for the most part it was about what he had to give up and what he sacrificed. That point I think is a good segue for me to talk about the cinematography.
Yes.
There are 2 points about the cinematography in this that 3 points that I want to make. First of all, on the technical level, I think there's a lot of borrowing from the Emergent trilogy, as I mentioned before, in terms of really bringing you into Franz's world and the way he thought about this world. The second and third are more technical. I don't know if you noticed, but majority of the film, I have to see it again to really look at this, but I think I would say 95% of the shots in this were done with wide-angle lenses, both inside and out.
I think that's probably true. Yeah,
that's a very intriguing choice because when you're in the outside as they're working in the fields and things like that, it's brilliant. I mean, that's what wide-angle lenses are for. They're for outside. They're for capturing, the natural beauty of the mountains and things like that. And it really emphasizes that. But when you bring the same camera indoors, it creates a very disorienting look, like you're kind of drunk a little bit. And
yeah.
for them to keep that look throughout the film, kind of makes the whole thing not necessarily dreamy as I would picture it in Knight of Cups. Knight of Cups was a very dreamy movie.
Very much so.
Hidden Life doesn't quite go to that extreme. The way I would the way I would characterize the use of the wide-angle lens is to kind of emphasize, is to try and to highlight the paranoia of the times.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense, to me, became stronger as the film went on, as you noticed the increasing alienation of the family in the town, the experience of France in prison, and knowing that, or I don't think he knew that he was going to be executed at that point necessarily, but building up to that, it just the way they set up the lens was to make the whole thing a little more paranoid, and to me that actually added to how horrific the experience was. So that's the second point. The third point that I want to make is if you notice, especially in the scenes with the town, the camera was at a very low level, as if to keep the perspective from the perspective of his young daughters, and that I think just kind of amped up the drama a little bit, because you're thinking what Franz had to give up. What was most painful in his sacrifice was, his daughters eventually growing up without their father because of what he sacrificed, and I think they really emphasized that by keeping the viewpoints low, like as if you're seeing the world from the eyes of his daughters. And that's the other thing I noticed.
I think that's such a great point. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but now that you say that, I think that makes so much sense. And I also really appreciate with the cinematography, like as we talked about before, this certainly is a challenging film to watch emotionally, but it also at the same time, it's not devoid of entertainment value. And I think part of that comes from the cinematography, because I think Terrence Malick really does appreciate spectacle as an art, and whether you're in outdoors or inside in the film, the camera is moving a lot, and it's a real rush of movement. And the trilogy you brought up, to the Wonder, Knight of Cups, and Song to Song, and in each of those films there's a shot where a camera is kind of the camera's sort of racing after a car, and we get the same thing with the shots of Franz on his motorcycle in this, and it's kind of an odd continuity. It's just the way it's filmed with the camera suspended and racing after him, like you feel like you're going on a ride, and that's exciting, but it's also, there's a dramatic principle there, because you need to feel the idyllic quality of his life before everything is lost. You need to feel the sense of what, not only what's been taken from him, but essentially what he chooses to give up for the sake of doing the right thing.
Well, not totally related to what you just said, but what I appreciated as well is it didn't fall into the usual trappings of World War II movies, mm-hmm. where they just show the three-dimensional depiction of the evil Nazi doing evil things.
Sure. Yes.
I'm glad they didn't go with that, because I'm so sick of that.
This isn't a World War II movie. It's a World War I movie. But it's funny. I just saw. I can't. I'm thinking of it because of what we're talking about. I just saw in 1917, and that I mean, there's some. I think there's some really impressive filmmaking in that film as well. But there's a problem with it, which I think is a problem with a lot of movies about both world wars, which is there's this kind of slick quality and this elegance, and you compare that with the messiness and the nuance and the rawness of a hidden life, and it just it really gives you some perspective on like just how great it is what Malick did, but even what Christopher Nolan did with Dunkirk, which is very different than both of those films, but like has that kind of visceral intensity that a film like 1917 just can't even really touch, honestly.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen 1917 yet. I plan to see it either tomorrow or in the next few days. But yeah, I totally get your point. And personally, when it comes to World War I, World War II, or any war movie, I'm really bothered by a lot of the shine that's put into these films. The way they're depicted, you don't really get the true sense of the horror of it. I mean, I can't say that I know what I'm talking about because I've never fought in a war, but you would just imagine that war would be so much worse.
Yes.
Here's the funny thing, just to swing it back to A Hidden Life. I really like how you felt that, or at least for speaking for me anyways, I felt that the dreadfulness of that period, of that event of World War II. I felt that, to me, the dreadfulness of that war was much more apparent in this film, even though they didn't show any Nazis doing bad things or any explosions. They really showed the true cost of war, and I think that's what gets lost in a lot of Hollywood depictions of war.
I agree, and I think this speaks to a criticism some people have had of the film that I really don't like, which is, they feel that Malick is, not as attentive to history as he should be. But for me, there's something really radical about, a World War II film in which there's no combat, there's no battle scenes. There's we don't even see really any images of the genocide we know is taking place, and yet we're seeing something that's really important, which is the home front, which is how most people do experience war, and to see what's at stake there, and and I think it's kind of interesting because Franz doesn't he hasn't seen with his own eyes what's happening. He only knows what he's heard, and yet that is enough for him to make the right choice, and that I think is kind of radical.
Right, exactly. As a world war, as a war film, I really like how this humanizes the cost of war. In contrast to other movies where, for example, Tarantino's *Inglourious Bastard*. It's your typical comic book, 2D, two-dimensional, evil Nazi doing evil things, and then you jump into a film like A Hidden Life, where you're shown this idyllic town of simple country folk, where you would imagine not all of them were happy to send their sons and husbands to war. For all we know, a lot of them could have held the same views as Franz and absolutely did not want to be part of Hitler's machine.
Yes.
They were just too afraid to speak up and to defy that the way Franz did. But anyways, I guess I'm just comparing apples to oranges and this and that. But yeah. Anyways.
Well, it's funny because in a podcast of the recorded a while ago, I found myself also comparing Malick and Tarantino, and just kind of going on about how I think Malick is a vastly superior filmmaker, and I was like, God, I'm just saying one of the, I can already hear people saying oh, you're just a boring snob liking Malick better than Tarantino, but it's how I feel. I've never seen a Tarantino film more than once, and I love going back and rewatching Malick films is bookish and esoteric as that may make me sound. I genuinely do like Malick's films better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I heard he's already working on his next movie.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. religion is an important part of all his films. You know, I mean, I think you can make an argument that, you know, whether he appears or, you know, on screen or not, Christ is a supporting character in every Terrence Malick movie, and now he's literally making a movie about Christ. It just you know, like it wasn't what I predicted he was going to do next. I wasn't even sure if he was going to jump into another film right away, but it's like it seems inevitable now, you know.
Oh, so that's what his next movie is about. It's about Christ himself.
Well, no, I think it is about, you know, Christ himself, but I hear there's some kind of a dark genre twist, so I don't think it's going to be like the straightforward, you know, biblical story.
I hope they're not talking about another Noah situation and this and that, and drawing controversy to itself. But anyway,
please God, no, yeah.
I like that you brought up the religious aspect of it, because I would also say that this was a very Catholic movie. I would compare the character of Franz very much to a Joan of Arc type of character.
Oh, interesting. I like that.
Yeah, but yes, definitely this film was very religious. I mean, there's the character himself. I mean, he worked at the Catholic Church and things like that, and yeah, he was very much guided by his faith and spirituality.
It was interesting, you know, because my family's not religious, but my dad, you know, does teach at a Catholic school, and you know, one of his colleagues there is a guy, a priest who lives in a religious community with these other guys, and he was talking about, you know, all of them going to, you know, Regal Bridgeport to see this movie together, and he did really like it. And I was talking to him about it, and so it's kind of interesting to, you know, see, you know, how that just how this movie speaks to people, you know, but also I know you have to go soon, but I wanted to ask you quickly, Patrick. You know, one thing that sometimes has been talked about is does the film question Franz Jägerstätter enough in terms of like you know, showing the, I don't know, no, just like the, like, you know, just the, you know, just the cost of his, you know, choice, the effect it had on his family. I know some people you know, feel that it deifies him too much. I don't agree with that personally. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
I don't think it deifies him, but I kind of get where that commentary is coming from, because there's another critical scene in this film where he wasn't called back for his second draft yet. He was still in the village, but he was already discussing with the townsfolk and his wife and things about not swearing an oath to Hitler, and that was very offensive to a lot of people there. But you know, that the whole scene where he didn't want to donate money to the cause,
yep,
and things like that. A critical scene here is where he seeks advice from the town or the city's archbishop, and the archbishop was basically telling him not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it in hindsight, you know, Franz is sainted by the Catholic Church. So you would kind of get the sense that Franz is actually a superior spiritual authority than the bishop himself, or the archbishop, or whatever the cardinal that in that scene. So it puts him at a level above that. So I can kind of get the commentary about Franz being overly deified in this film, but I don't think that's what Malick was going for. I think if he seems like he's being put on a pedestal, it's because, I mean, he is historically the Catholic Church itself
sure,
painted him. You know, he's just become that figure in history. But I don't think that Malick was doing that on purpose. If anything, Malick was doing the opposite. I see Malick as trying to paint him as just a very ordinary man.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel the same way, and one thing that I really liked is you have, you actually quite a few scenes where different characters like ask him, are you doing this? Ask Franz, are you doing this out of pride? And what I liked about those scenes is they explored the idea that doing the right thing, it doesn't come from one motivation. It can be both true that maybe there was an element in Franz Jägerstätter of pride and doing this to show that he was strong enough to take the torment, and that it also came from a place of principle, and that those things can both be true, and that he was both a Christ-like figure and a very human man, subject to the same nobility and frailty that many people would be.
Right. I don't know. I guess the rest of us, Malick included, and the screenwriters, you really can't 100% get into somebody's head, especially somebody like Franz, who made a very difficult decision. You can't account for all of those things, and the scenes that you're talking about, where they're talking about pride, I imagine, I don't know what source material they're going off of, if they're like letters and archives or things like that. But I would imagine it's very difficult to write scenes like that, so you would think that the screenwriters are kind of embellishing those scenes a little bit, just trying to create a narrative.
Sure.
I would have to see those scenes again to see the nuances of the writing. Anyways, what's the original question again?
I was really just. Actually, I'm not sure.
I think we're getting into the question if Franz was being overly deified in this movie.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
I don't know that. I would have to pick apart the screenplay much closer, and if there are scenes that seem a little stretched, then I would imagine that the screenwriters just kind of filled in the blanks where there was no historical record of his thought process.
Sure.
And you kind of have to do that, right? If you're gonna put together a film that's somewhat cohesive and coherent, that you would have to create scenes like that, and it's difficult to create a movie without those kind of scenes.
Yeah, which is why I don't necessarily see this as a straight biography. I see it more as a kind of a poetic wrestling with the ideas that the story of his life brings up, and to me that's actually much more valuable than just a movie kind of blandly hitting the facts of his life. And I think it's worth maybe breaking a couple rules or kind of telling the story in a more dreamlike way that it wasn't necessarily beat for beat like his life was. I think that can get at a deeper emotional truth. I think that's more worthwhile, honestly.
Yeah, but anyways, it's almost 2, so we're gonna have to wrap this up. But just to swing it back around, I would still say that this film is 4 out of 4 stars. Another really good Malick film, in my opinion, that hit it out of the park for Malick fans. I can understand why a lot of people wouldn't enjoy it, but personally, it really hit me, and I don't know that I could watch this movie again. I mean, earlier today I was just watching trailers, and it was already putting me to the verge of tears.
I hear you. I want to see it again, but it's I don't know. It's tough to after you've been through hell to be like, let's do that for another 3 hours.
Yeah. Anyways, it's been fun, and we got to do this again.
We will, absolutely. Yeah, it's so great talking to you, Patrick.
Yeah, so likewise, Ben. Okay, well, keep up and let me know what else has come up, and hopefully I'll be able to join you guys.
Absolutely, I look forward to it.
All right, Ben. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Well, if you like this podcast, please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at T.H.O Movie Reviews. And please check out all the great reviews and content we have at THOMoviereviews.wordpress.com. Once again, I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I want to thank Patrick for joining me. I want to thank all of you out there for listening. And from all of us here at T.H.O Movie Reviews, happy movie watching.